SEAL commander and former hostage negotiator Dan O'Shea and Foundation for the Defense of Democracy's senior fellow Miad Maleki. So let's start with you, Dan. Are we closer to a deal? How optimistic are you that we're going to see this actually produce something?
Well, Trump, with all of his negotiations, he doesn't come to the table with optimism until it looks like something's on the table. But again, it's still the devil's in the details, and the issue that the uranium enrichment has not been a firm decision. That's why that is always going to be the sticking point. And Iran has made negotiations in the past that they've never delivered on. So I'm not as optimistic that this is going to go as smooth as it's being presented by the president right now.
And to your point, Dan, Miad, I ask you, there's sort of a couple of phases here. Phase one is getting to actual commitments and getting them to Iran to the negotiating table, we have seen is very difficult. But then phase two is really the follow through with things like the enriched uranium. Do you believe that after 47 years of being unable to trust Iran, that if President Trump can get to this historic final agreement and get actual hard commitments, that we will see the follow-through phase two part?
That's the thing with this Islamic regime in Iran. It's very unpredictable. You don't really know to what extent they're going to commit to their promises or to stay in compliance with their commitments. But here's the thing. They're in a much different position that they were in 2015, 2016 when the JCPOA, the Obama administration's deal was negotiated with them. They're militarily, economically, diplomatically, they're degraded. They've never been so isolated diplomatically that they are today. So I think President Trump, to his credit, has established a level of leverage with this regime that no president has ever had since 1979 revolution. They're in such a difficult spot today, and don't listen to the propaganda and rhetoric that you're hearing, that they've shut up internet on their own population for now over 60, 70 days now, completely dark, because they're more afraid of their domestic opposition and the fall of the regime than they're of the external threat that they're facing today.
Dan, Miad is right. Iran has never been weaker, and economically, it's certainly close to being on the brink of collapse. The Wall Street Journal editorial board, though, is a less optimistic, perhaps a little bit like you. They write this. They say Iran's regime went into this war facing domestic political and economic crises. War has made these worse. Saving such a regime now with an economic bailout would be the real betrayal of the U.S. interest, even more than the Iranian people. Your reaction?
Well, I agree with my colleague, that the Iran regime has never been more destabilized. But they still have the IRGC. They've taken out the senior mullahs, but the radicalized IRGC and the like are still in control. And unfortunately, we blinked first. President Trump blinked by making this deal, and it really comes down to the midterms and the current status of oil in the United States, oil around the world, and tremendous pressure. But my biggest fear is that we needed to take out the IRGC. The Iranian people were clamoring for it, demanding it, and that's my fear that this will not end well, and things will revert back in a matter of years and decades. We'll be back right where we started because the regime is still in play.
It's a fair point, Dan, but it's worth stepping back and noting that what President Trump has done, unlike President Obama, because everyone's referring back to the JCPOA, or President Bush, or anyone else before President Trump, no one was really willing to go and take them on and hit them hard. And not only were they not willing to do it, they were certainly not going to do it in an election year. President Trump has made it clear that what's at play here is way bigger than a the midterm elections or temporary rising gas prices. So, Miad, I ask you, when you hear President Trump, as we read that Truth Social, trying to bring the majority of the remaining countries like Saudi Arabia and others in the Middle East to the Abraham Accords, something that he started in his first term that led to more peace and prosperity in the Middle East, this is possibly a historic achievement if President Trump can get there.
That's absolutely right. I mean, here's the thing. You're so right to point out that President Trump has really done what no U.S. president historically was willing or, able to do. And all presidents really just kicked the can down the road on the Iran issue, and President Trump is the first president who said no and wanted to really deal with it. Now, really what's going to end up being our situation with Iran moving forward is what really the text of this deal, which we don't know about, because what you're hearing is mostly the Iranian regime propaganda, because they desperately need to make this deal look like a win for them, because they have only 10-15% in the country that continue to support them, and they really have radicalized that 10 to 15%, and they need to show them that they got some win out of this. Mm-hmm. And now they've, not just economically so isolated and degraded, but diplomatically. Listen, the Gulf states, these Arab nations that you named, they used to provide Iran with ways and means to bypass U.S. sanctions and give Iranian regime its economic lifeline. Now, Iran has really pushed them closer to the U.S. and Israel position that they've never been on the Iran issue. Emiratis, they took more missiles and drones from Iran than the Israelis did. So I think it is true that out of everything that came out of this conflict with Iran, a significant cost for American people, but with major achievements, military achievements, thanks to our service members and pioneers in Pentagon and Tampa and elsewhere. We're at the position that the Arab nations are really more on the side of Israel and U.S. than they've ever been on this issue.
Miad, Maleki, and Dan O'Shea, thank you for your insights. We'll see where it goes. Hopefully in a few days we may know more. Have a good day.